Discover the incredible moment when a pregnant wolf's plea transformed an elderly woman's life. Forever. Mabel stood at the edge of her overgrown fields, the sun dipping low behind the trees, shadows creeping along the once cherished soil. Each step she took through the weeds seemed to echo the laughter of her children, now grown and scattered like leaves in autumn. The silence weighed down on her, heavy and relentless, as memories of family gatherings filled with joy felt more like dreams fading into dusk. Loneliness wrapped around her, tighter than any quilt she had once made for her children. The farm, once a vibrant hub of life, now mirrored her own despair, a fading relic of a past she could hardly reclaim. Just as Mabel turned away, preparing to retreat to the silence of her empty home, a haunting howl pierced through the evening air. Alarmed, she stepped outside, her heart racing with uncertainty. The twilight sky flickered with dark clouds, an ominous backdrop for what lay ahead. And there it was, a pregnant wolf, stumbling toward her, its emaciated body pleading for help. A wave of compassion swept through Mabel, a feeling long buried beneath layers of sorrow and solitude. Instinctively she knelt down, awe and fear mingling in her chest. Was she really ready to take in this wild creature, so vulnerable and desperate? As Mabel fed the wolf and settled it into a makeshift den, she felt a spark ignite within her. The nurturing spirit she thought had dulled over the years blossomed into life. With each meal she prepared, each tender moment spent caring for the creature, she found herself pulled deeper into the bond they were forging. The wolf's fierce resilience resonated within her, stirring something dormant and powerful. Yet doubt mingled with her hope. She wondered if she could truly protect this delicate life as her own circumstances grew ever more precarious. What would the neighbors say? Could she face their scorn, their fears? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as connections began to form with her neighbors, whispers of the wolf's presence curdled the atmosphere. Fear ran rampant, grudging glances turned to outright hostility. What if it attacked someone's livestock? What if it posed a threat to the children? Mabel's heart sank as she watched the community she had known for decades that cast her in a different light. She found herself facing not just the stakes of her choices, but the darker shades of isolation. As the impending storm brewed outside, conflicting emotions swirled in her chest. Could she fight for the wolf without losing herself? As thunder rumbled overhead, tension tightened around her like a vice. Mabel knew she would have to become an advocate in a fight she never intended to start. The question loomed large. Where did her loyalties lie? Just as she braced herself to speak her truth at the upcoming town meeting, a storm raged within her, a tempest of fear and determination. With the winds howling and the stakes rising, would she find the strength to defend her new family, or would the forces of fear prove just too powerful? The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, threatening to engulf her in its darkness, leaving her on the precipice of an unknown battle. Mabel stood in front of the mirror, the dim light casting shadows across her worn face. The weight of the decision ahead pressed down on her, a tangible heaviness that solidified the air around her. She practiced her words, but they caught in her throat, tangled in a knot of uncertainty and fear. How could she articulate her intentions when even she struggled to understand them? The wolf, with its quiet strength, had breathed life back into Mabel, yet now guilt sat heavily on her shoulders, urging her to reconsider. The howling winds outside mirrored the tumult in her mind. Advocacy was foreign territory. It felt as frightening as standing naked before a crowd. Mabel was a farmer, a mother, had been a protector, but her world had shrunk beneath layers of grief and loss. Now, standing on this precipice, her heart raced at what her neighbors would say or do, their eyes judging her, their whispers taunting like a swirling tempest. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her, seeking warmth not just from the fabric but from the memories of the people she had once held dear. In her haste to protect the wolf, had she awakened the very scorn she feared? She pictured the faces in the community, some filled with suspicion, others laced with outright disdain. Yet there, mixed within their expressions, was also a flicker of curiosity. Mabel couldn't ignore it. Perhaps this wolf represented more than just an anomaly in their lives. Perhaps it echoed the forgotten stories of care and protection that once defined their small town. The evening arrived, drawing Mabel toward the meeting hall, a place steeped in collective memories that brushed against her heart with every step. Her gait was steady, her resolve harder than it had been days before. She knew she needed the courage to confront not just the town, but the conflicting emotions within herself. The wolf's eyes shone in her memory, filled with raw vulnerability and fierce love. She owed it to both of them to fight. As she entered the hall, the familiar faces turned toward her, shrouded in a murmur of disbelief and questioning gazes. The tension was palpable, a living entity swirling among the crowd, and her heart pounded with each footfall. Mabel's breath quickened, an instinctive response to fear. Yet surrounded by darkness, she felt something shift within. Could this be it? The moment to rise, to reclaim her voice not just for her own sake, but for that of the creature that had probed deeper than she thought possible. The chair creaked beneath her as she took her place at the front, her voice faltering for a moment amidst the sea of scrutiny. But this was no time for hesitation. She would not allow doubt to snatch away her worth. Mabel thought of the days spent nurturing the wolf, learning its needs, understanding its plight. If she could experience that transformation, why couldn't the town see the potential for connection and coexistence? "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice trembling like the remnants of a storm about to break. "I stand before you today, not just to ask for your compassion for this wolf, but to share how it has awakened something in me, in all of us." With those words, Mabel's heart surged, and the room fell silent. This was the moment she had been painstakingly preparing for, where the shackles of isolation fell away. No longer just a widow living in echoes, she was a messenger, an advocate, and perhaps, just perhaps, a catalyst for change. As she continued, the doubt that had previously consumed her began to melt like ice under the warmth of her newfound empowerment. But just as her confidence solidified, the sound of a door slamming echoed like thunder. A figure emerged from the shadows. Someone from her past, someone who had a vested interest in challenging her resolve. The weight of the unexpected confrontation loomed, filling the room with uncertainty as Mabel's breath caught in her throat. Would she falter, or would she rise to the moment? The answer lay ahead, shrouded in the fires of conflict waiting to ignite. Mabel's gaze snapped toward the figure that loomed in the doorway, her heart racing, instant panic mingling with a flicker of defiance. It was Walter, her former neighbor, a man whose reputation flickered with sharp edges and unyielding opinions. Those who failed to adhere to the status quo dared not cross him, yet here he was, watching her with an expression that bordered between incredulity and disdain. "Do you really think we should gamble our safety on a wild animal?" he sneered, stepping further into the hall. His presence added weight to the air, pressing against Mabel's resolve. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, uncertain, curious, and fearful, each word resonating like echoes of her own insecurity. For the briefest moment, Mabel considered retreating, the old habits of silence and subservience tugging at her heart. But the image of the wolf, the way it had fought for breath, for survival, flashed before her mind's eye. In that strong, unyielding gaze, she had found purpose. Her pulse quickened as the memory solidified her determination. "Walter," Mabel responded, firming her stance as she spoke. "We've been living in fear for too long. If the wolf was dangerous, I assure you, I wouldn't have taken it in." Her voice was steadier than it had been, a growing foundation that now resonated deeply within her. "Taking in a wolf, Mabel? You might as well welcome a lion into your home," Walter shot back, his expression twisting in incredulity. "What kind of example are you setting for our children?" A challenge hung in the distance, tantalizing and heavy. Mabel inhaled sharply, the air sharp and electric. Here was her peer, her rival, Yet he was also a piece of the very community she sought to transform. Yet she was tired of being governed by other people's expectations. Our children need to learn compassion, not fear. Mabel's voice rang out, testing the waters. What better opportunity than to see a creature that needs our help? To show them that sometimes our greatest fears can become our greatest teachers? The room was silent. The crowd was reeling, assessing her words against their preconceptions, challenged in the midst of their own established beliefs. A doubt flickered in Mabel's mind. Would she succeed in changing Walter's heart? Or would he incite an uprising against her? What do you know about wolves, Mabel? They are not pets. They are predators, Walter thundered, the scorn that usually accompanied his tone now tinged with concern. He leaned forward, intent on haranguing her back into submission, but Mabel felt a different resolve rising within her. I know they are vital to our ecosystem, that they feel pain and loss just like us, she countered, standing firm in empathy. What I know is that we all share this land, and we all have a responsibility to care for each other, human and animal alike. Walter's face darkened, anger and disbelief battling for dominance. You're playing a dangerous game, Mabel. I will not let you endanger us. The crowd murmured, voices hushed again, but the uncertainty was no longer solely about Mabel. They were beginning to weigh her arguments against their ingrained beliefs. Mabel caught snippets of conversation, whispers laced with intrigue, uncertainty mingling with the flicker of hope. In that moment, a realization dawned upon her. This wasn't just about her relationship with the wolf. This was about reclaiming her identity, redefining her strength, and illuminating the strength of vulnerability before her town. The metaphorical dampening of her spirit was beginning to shift into a powerful mantle of authority as she grappled with her newfound perspective. Before she could catch her breath, Walter took a step closer, his gaze fierce. You will regret this, Mabel. But for the first time in many years, she felt untethered from the chains of regret. She squared her shoulders, embodying every ounce of conviction she had ignited within herself. And I will not face it alone. Just as she prepared to respond, her mind running ahead, weaving a tapestry of possibilities, she glanced back at the crowd, her heart thudding with the weight of the moment. The resolve in their eyes sparked a flicker of hope. Would they rise with her, or would they turn away? The challenge hovered in the air, a critical juncture of confrontation blurring the lines of allegiance, thrusting Mabel deeper into an internal reckoning. What awaited her as the line between acceptance and rejection narrowed? Mabel's determination surged, the fight ripe within her as she awaited the inevitable fallout, feeling the pulse of transformation creeping closer. Mabel could feel the air thickening around her as she faced Walter, his disapproval a tangible force. Her heart raced not just from the confrontation, but from the overwhelming need to prove herself. Every eye in the room, some skeptical, others anxious, was focused on her, hanging on her words. It was a moment rife with potential, buzzing with an electricity she'd rarely felt before. Listen, she said, her voice tempered but unwavering. I understand the fear. But think of how many times we've let fear dictate our choices. We avoid the unknown, ignore the possibilities. What if this wolf is a chance to redefine how we coexist? Walter's scoffing laugh morphing into silence only heightened her resolve. Each unfolding second felt monumental, and the realization struck Mabel with startling clarity. This was not just about the wolf. This was about her journey, her personal development, emerging from the shadows of doubt into her own light. Mabel needed to ground herself, to focus amidst the distractions. Drawing a deep breath, she recalled the image of the wolf, bloodied, yet fierce, a symbol of resilience. In that moment, she comprehended the latent power within her. The fear that had plagued her for years now stretched and thinned, prompting her to embrace a truth far scarier than facing Walter's judgment, forging her path and standing by her beliefs. Compassion and fear cannot coexist, she continued, each word growing stronger. We can choose to shelter ignorance, or we can choose to educate ourselves. This wolf reminds us how fragile our existence is, and how connected we all truly are. The audience shifted, her words finding purchase in their minds like seeds planted in fertile soil. She could see it in the nodding heads, the furrowed brows as they considered the implications. Lines of uncertainty began to blur, and a subtle transformation ignited within her community. But Walter was not ready to concede. And if it attacks someone? If it causes chaos? What then, Mabel? You'll have no one to blame but yourself. His words hung in the air, draping themselves over the gathering with a threatening weight. Mabel felt her heart flip at the thought. What if he was right? What if she had miscalculated the potential consequences of her actions? But she quickly cast aside the creeping doubt, reminding herself of the strength she had begun to cultivate. I won't let fear stagnate me any longer, she declared, locking eyes with Walter bravely. I will face any backlash head-on, for this is a battle worth taking. She caught the gaze of a mother in the crowd, a woman whose child was known for his love of animals. What kind of world do we want our children to grow up in? Mabel pressed on, her voice rising. One where we villainize creatures simply because they're different? Or one where we encourage empathy? One where we foster understanding? The murmurs grew louder once more, a symphony of confusion battling budding hope. Mabel felt a shift, a tide turning as she harnessed the momentum of her declarations. Yet, an internal tug-of-war still waged within her. Was this conviction merely bravado, a facade crumbling under pressure? Suddenly, a child's voice piped up from the back. I want to see the wolf too. It was a simple statement, yet it illuminated the room, igniting a spark of curiosity that contrasted sharply with Walter's hardened disposition. Mabel's heart soared. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was unraveling the fear as much in herself as those around her. Confronting the underlying rigidity in her identity was monumental, and it began here, right in front of Walter. Will you stand with me then? She challenged, her standout vulnerability daring to poke at his resolve. She knew Walter was a man of influence. If he shifted, there might be more hope than she had dared to dream. The anticipation hung heavy, the outcome uncertain. As the crowd shifted again, uncertainty flickered across many faces. Mabel's heart pounded. Was this her moment of acceptance? Would they choose to embrace her vision? The air crackled with unvoiced responses, and she turned her gaze back to Walter, ready to lay her final bid bare. The tension between them could ignite a path forward, or cast her into deeper conflict. Would they rally, or would the darkness of doubt creep back into her life? Mabel prepared to lay everything on the line as she awaited Walter's next reaction, the weight of their convergence setting the stage for a decision that could change everything. Mabel's resolve hung in the air, vibrant and almost palpable, daring Walter to respond. She meticulously analyzed the lines on his face, searching for cracks in his armor. Every half-second stretched into eternity, uncertainty radiating from the gathered crowd like static electricity. It made her feel weighty, yet light at once, an iron core beneath a burst of freedom. Walter finally shifted, his brows knitting together as he surveyed the crowd, the skepticism wavering in his gaze. You're asking for a leap of faith, Mabel. His voice was lower now, less combative. Do you truly believe they will support you? That they will be willing to look past their own fears? Her heart raced. This was foundational, the bridge that connected her will to theirs. I do believe they will, Walter. Slowly, perhaps. But it's a start, and starts can change legacies. The conviction that resonated within her emboldened her to cast aside hesitation, to harness the escalating wave of emotion brewing in the room. A beat of silence passed, her breath catching on the structure of her statement. She could feel the tension vibrating between her and Walter like a taut string ready to snap. You can lead our people in a different direction, Walter. Will you come with me? The challenge poured from her, its strength unyielding. Walter's eyes flickered, caught in a web of self-reflection, torn between duty and curiosity. Did he feel it too? The charge rising amongst the citizens, a ripple of excitement on the brink of awakening? Maybe the wolf was the catalyst for understanding, a chance for people to confront their own biases and insecurities. As Mabel pressed forward, she felt the core of her being solidify. No longer was she simply arguing, she was advocating for change. It occurred to her then that this experience was not merely about the villagers or their fears, but was about establishing her authority as a leader. She was forging a new path, one that would require her to shoulder the weight of the outcome. Let's not allow fear to imprint our memories, she implored, now addressing everyone within the hall. Imagine a world where we connect with the diverse aspects of nature around us rather than isolate them. We can redefine how we see ourselves reflected in the preservation of all life. The murmurs in the crowd began to shift from doubt to hesitant agreement. Mabel could see the change in their faces, curiosity blooming where once there had been trepidation. Could she inspire more than just acceptance? Could she ignite the flickering flames of passion for coexistence within them? Walter squinted, harsh lines on his face smoothening as moments of introspection washed over him. What if we're wrong? He questioned, but his voice lacked the cutting edge it once held. What if this wolf drives chaos rather than harmony? Then we will address that chaos together, Mabel articulated deliberately. Fear is not a long-term solution. It only serves to entrap us further in a cycle of what-ifs. Allow me to educate them, show them the truth, and let it guide us. Walter grabbed the edge of the podium, still struggling, but Mabel saw it, the crack in his resolve, the growing desire to bridge this divide. But then chaos erupted outside the hall. A bark, sharp and primal, pierced their discourse, slicing through Mabel's infusion of hope like a jagged rock. The blood rushed from her head as worried gasps ricocheted off the walls. Walter's face blanched, reverting into the concrete fear that had gripped everyone before. "What was that?" someone shouted, panic slicing through the crowd. An inkling of doubt, of sheer unadulterated fear gripped Mabel. She couldn't let it, but her instincts screamed louder than her aspirations. "Stay calm," she urged, her voice ringing steadier than she felt. "Let me go check on it. We need to face this together." Before she fully grasped the implications of her decision, she stepped away from the podium, piercing through the sea of apprehensive faces toward the door. Mabel knew she was stepping into the darkest part of her fears, and yet she also understood that this could either be a defining moment of failure or the key to irrevocable change. With every step toward the outside, she felt a surge of anticipation. Would this be the moment that sealed their fates, or her own? She prepared herself for whatever awaited her in the dimming light of the world beyond. Mabel pushed the door open, the cold air hitting her like a slap. The sharp bark resonated again, closer now, mingling with the growls that hinted at an altercation off to her left. Her heart raced, each thump echoing the looming questions hurtling through her mind. Was it a threat? A scared animal? She fought against the instinct to retreat. Breath hitching, she steadied herself on the threshold, surveying the dimly lit space outside. Shadows danced between trees, and the murmurs from the crowd inside faded behind her. This was her moment. Time to confront the unknown, not just in the world around her, but within herself. "Stay together," she shouted back into the hall, though unsure if they could hear over the rising chaos. She edged forward, gripping the rough wood of the doorframe, prepared to meet whatever lay ahead. The scene unfolded before her, a primal tableau. A wolf stood on the outskirts of the clearing, its hackles raised, eyes fiery and fierce. It was not just any wolf. It was a pregnant female, fear radiating from her like a beacon. The air bristled with tension, and Mabel felt her palms grow sweaty. "Just a wolf," she murmured to herself, forcing calmness into her voice. The easy dismissal of the fear was just a facade. This was no ordinary encounter. It was a vortex of survival instinct, fear, and something deeper. A potential for connection she had hoped to harness among her people. As she took a cautious step forward, the wolf shifted. Mabel's heart clenched with urgency. The creature was intent on protecting her unborn young at all costs. Could she convey understanding instead of fear? Should she risk stepping into the unknown, into a potential for injury or even death? The implications cascaded through her mind. This was a reflection of her own battles with fear and acceptance. The wolf's growls echoed again, but she noticed something else, an almost pleading whimper, softer, more vulnerable. Mabel's gut twisted. There was desperation there, a silent cry for help masked within its ferocity. In that moment, she realized her path could either forge deeper divides or hold the possibility of empathy. "Hey," she called out, her voice trembling with a blend of defiance and compassion. "I'm not here to hurt you. I want to understand." The declaration surprised her. Where did that come from? An impulse, one fueled by the very beliefs she had espoused just moments ago. If she could be a voice for the people, why not for this creature? The wolf paused, ears perked, registering her words. Mabel took a small step forward, extending her hand as though that gesture alone could bridge the divide between fear and trust. "You can trust me," she whispered, though she wondered if she believed it herself. In that tension-filled moment, she felt a tremor of her own vulnerability. This was fraught with risk, both for her and the people watching from behind. But could this wolf not represent everything she'd just rallied against? A manifestation of the fears and prejudices that bound her community, begging to be understood. Mabel realized this was a dance beyond mere survival. As she locked eyes with the wolf, she recognized the parallel struggle. Forging connections in the face of fear was a testament to her growth as a leader. Could she be the one to teach her people that courage resided not just in the absence of fear but in the face of it? The crowd's whispers crept back in, a wavering chorus of uncertainty. She turned briefly back towards the hall, searching for familiar faces who had once scoffed at her ideals. They were silent now, caught between horror and curiosity, just as she was. Could this pivotal moment redefine everything? Mabel turned back to the wolf, determination etched in her features. Another bark shattered the silence, and the time to act crystallized. Strength surged within her. The choice was hers to make, a potent moment strung between possibility and chaos. Would she falter, or could she ignite change even here? As she leaned further forward, she felt the weight of her choices bearing down, shifting from fear to an exhilarating sense of purpose. Would the wolf respond to her gesture of peace, or would it retreat, leaving Mabel grasping for a deeper connection that remained just out of reach? The world hung in balance. So too did Mabel's burgeoning role as a leader, precariously poised on the edge of transformation. Could she confront not just the wolf, but the doubt within herself that had lingered for so long? The night held its breath, and Mabel prepared herself for whatever would unfold in the next moment. Mabel felt the world freeze around her, the weight of her surroundings pressing in as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The wolf's fierce gaze bore into hers, a tension palpable in the air. This was no longer just an encounter. It was an unveiling. The emotions she had carefully kept buried surged to the surface, raw and unfiltered. With each passing second, the wolf shifted its stance, moving slightly but still ready to defend itself. Mabel's heart drummed a frantic rhythm, echoing her internal conflict. She was not just confronting this wild creature. She was confronting the fear that had paralyzed her for too long. The nagging voice in her mind questioned whether she had the strength to rise above that fear, whether her values had any grounding in reality. "Please," she breathed, her voice barely carrying on the crisp night air. "I want to help you." The sincerity in her words surprised her, revealing a deeper conviction than she had expected to find. This was not about her or what lay behind her. Abruptly, the stakes felt monumental. If she could find connection here, perhaps she could unearth the pathway to healing she had so desperately sought for herself and her community. The wolf hesitated, its fierce demeanor softening just significantly enough to suggest that Mabel's words were understood. She took a deep breath, each inhale steadying the storm inside her. It occurred to her how she mirrored the wolf in this moment, standing vulnerable but unwilling to hide. "You're scared," she articulated gently, her hand moving further out, fingers curling in a gesture of peace. "I see that. I know what it feels like." Internally, Mabel wrestled with her own fear. Was she truly capable of extending this moment beyond herself? Everyone had questions, for her opposition, her beliefs, her projections of what leadership meant. If she could connect with a creature often viewed through a lens of fear, perhaps it would empower her to confront the doubts festering among her people. The wolf's ears twitched, and its body language shifted. The growl diminished, replaced by a low whimper that pulled at Mabel's heart. In this vulnerable moment, she realized the wolf was not just a representation of her community's fears, but also a reflection of her own fragility. What had she been hiding from? If she could summon the bravery to reach out to this wild creature, perhaps she could peel back the layers of her own hesitance. Her resolve solidified, Mabel took another tentative step, focusing on the connection she felt budding between them. This was about moving forward, shattering the constraints of fear, and allowing trust to bloom in desolate places. "We can achieve so much if we just embrace our fears instead of running from them," she murmured, uncertain if she was speaking to the wolf or to herself. Suddenly, a rustle among the trees yanked Mabel from their shared moment. The crowd's gasps echoed through the clearing as a figure pushed forward, one of the men from the hall, his face twisted with disbelief and concern. "Mabel, get back! You don't know what you're doing!" Panic surged within her, but she didn't take her eyes off the wolf. It quivered, uncertainty flickering across its features. "Stay back!" she ordered, her voice sharper now, shaking off the impulse to panic. The man's presence jeopardized what she had just begun to cultivate. "Put it down," he demanded, stepping closer, raising his arm as if to wield a weapon. Mabel's heart pounded against her ribcage. The wolf reacted, snapping back with newfound fury, and in that instant, she recognized her choice. This was no longer about the animal alone. Everything hinged on her ability to show courage in the face of confrontation. She turned to the man, feeling punched by the reality that her values were under siege. "You need to trust me. You have to let me do this." Her voice resonated with defiance. Beneath it all, she realized this was the pivot point she had been craving, a chance to prove that understanding could overcome fear, but only if she led with conviction. The space between them pulsed with conflict. The wolf, the man, and Mabel found themselves entangled in a moment that demanded resolution. Would the man's hostility shatter their moment? Or could Mabel forge a deeper understanding, setting a new course for herself and perhaps for all those frozen behind her in fear? As the wolf's eyes flickered between Mabel and the man, she felt the gravity of the situation swell, igniting a fire of purpose inside her. This was a defining moment that would shape who she was to become. The night held its breath, the outcome hanging delicately in the balance as Mabel readied herself for the confrontation she had chased her entire life. Would she find the strength to not just stand her ground, but to transform a desperate plea into a powerful action? The air tightened around them, suspended in uncertainty, as the destiny of both the wolf and Mabel's journey hung in precarious balance. Mabel's heart raced, but clarity surged beneath the chaos. The scene enveloped her in a palpable tension, a push and pull of emotions that fused fear and determination. The man's approach threatened to crush the connection she was forging with the wolf, yet within that threat lay an unexpected opportunity for growth. If she could maintain her ground against his aggression, it would not only demonstrate her resolve but also carve a new path in her personal narrative. "Listen to me," Mabel exclaimed, pushing her voice above the chaos that enveloped them. "This isn't just a wolf. It's a living being that feels fear just like we do." She could feel the weight of disbelief in the man's glare, but stood firm, channeling her inner resolve. "She needs help, not violence. You don't want to scare her. Not now." The man hesitated, fluctuating between skepticism and concern. Mabel sensed his internal struggle, much like her own. Yet, with every passing second, the wolf's regard remained softening, its tension bleeding into an unexpected vulnerability. This contradiction resonated deeply with her. The notion that something so fierce could simultaneously bear a gentle spirit mirrored her own. Mabel understood what it meant to hide strength behind layers of fear, a realization that pierced through her. As she maintained eye contact with the wolf, she initiated a silent dialogue within herself, urging her own fears to subside. There was a truth in connection, an unspoken agreement that transcended the apprehension raging around them. With every steady breath she took, a warm glow of bravery illuminated dark corners of her insecurities. "Please," she repeated, adjusting her posture to embody the calm she aimed for. "I know how you feel. I know you're scared." She lifted one hand higher, an offering rather than a threat. In that fragile moment, she felt the presence of something greater than herself, an urge to be bridged with a being often deemed untouchable and dangerous. Meanwhile, the man shifted nervously, the weapon in his hand trembling as if uncertain where to point it. The air thickened with the rising stakes. Mabel's heart sank at the thought that if he pulled the trigger, both she and the wolf would be annihilated in that instant. Different species caught in a web of shared fear. It was a narrative demanding rewrite, one she was determined to script. "Don't do this," she implored, bringing her focus back to him, the desperate plea mingling with conviction. "Think about what this shows us, about our humanity. We can't let fear define us, not anymore." The urgency in her voice echoed not only in her own ears, but seemed to resonate within the clearing, challenging the silhouettes drawn against the moonlight. As tension simmered, the wolf's breathing slowed, its eyes softening. Mabel pressed forward with a newfound urgency, sinking into the power of belief. We need to show compassion. To this creature, yes, but also to ourselves. Fear is only a framework we can dismantle. Silence stretched as each participant in the encounter wrestled with the weight of her words, the choice between violence and understanding so enticingly vivid. The man's expression melted from aggression to contemplation, teetering on the edge of decision. Mabel could feel the collective energy shift, as if the universe itself paused to witness the crossroad. In that pivotal instant, as she forged the moment at the brim of transformation, Mabel discovered something vital. Her voice had the power to reshape narratives, not just for others, but for herself. A realization unfurled within her, the notion that leadership wasn't about authority or command, but rather the capacity to provoke thought and inspire trust. Yet even as thoughts began to crystallize for her, the wolf elicited a low growl once more, setting off a ripple of tension. That sound penetrated Mabel's newfound optimism. The path still needed clarity, and she had yet to navigate the chaos rising between fear and resolution. Just then, as if the universe had relinquished its pause, an unforgiving rustle erupted in the bushes behind the man, a new specter of danger. Complications loomed, shifting the dynamic once more as new stakes emerged, threatening to unravel every fragile thread she had just attempted to weave. Mabel's heart raced again, but with renewed purpose she steeled herself for the next challenge. The pivotal moment had arrived. Would she continue to push through the uncertainty, embracing her role as both shield and advocate? In this unexpected wilderness of human and animal emotions, her journey was defining itself with terrifying momentum. The unknown beckoned. What would unfold next? Mabel's breath quickened as her instincts sharpened, the rustling behind the man growing louder, more insistent. Her heart pounded like a war drum, each beat urging her to act. The very air around them thickened with anticipation, wrapping her in a mist of fear and hope. The man flinched slightly, his attention tethered to the noise, which became more distinct, branches snapping under the weight of an unseen presence. What now? Mabel thought, her mind racing, scrambling for contingency plans. She couldn't focus on the fear that threatened to engulf her. There was too much at stake. Anchored by the wolf's presence, Mabel felt the pull of duality, a maternal need to protect, not just the wolf but herself, and possibly the man, too. She could feel her growing resolve shifting into a more strategic mindset. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, redirecting her energy toward the confrontation looming ahead. The man turned fully now, the weapon still clutching his trembling fingers, his face etched with uncertainty. It took only a fractional moment for his back to stiffen. He must have felt the cold stare of whatever creature lay hidden, invisible yet menacing in the darkened underbrush. Mabel saw it then, the moment suspended in time, a converging point where fear could ignite into either aggression or unity. "Listen to me," her voice rang out, cutting through the tension. "This is bigger than us. Whatever it is behind you, we can face it together, but not like this. Not with violence." Mabel realized she was no longer just pleading for the wolf's life, but defending their shared humanity too. The man blinked, the sudden clarity in Mabel's words splintering the fear into fragile pieces. Recognition flickered across his face, a glimmer of understanding breaking through the storm brewing in his eyes. "You're right," he muttered, visibly shaken. Mabel watched closely, reading every line of his expression. His internal conflict was palpable, an echo of her own past struggles with fear and pain. With her belief in compassion rising, Mabel decided to shift her approach. Vulnerability had been Mabel's armor in her own journey. Perhaps it could be the same for him. "I know what it's like to feel cornered," she said, her voice softening. "To feel as if every choice is a matter of survival. But what if we chose to trust instead?" The rustle in the bushes crescendoed into a loud snap, and Mabel caught a quick glimpse of fur, a shadow darting into the moonlight. It was then she understood. It was not one but a small pack, their presence demanding respect and a response. The fear in the man's eyes deepened, but Mabel knew she couldn't falter now. She gathered her thoughts, firming her stance. This moment was not just her own crossroads. It was shared. "See them?" she gestured, her voice steady. "They are just as scared. What if we give them a chance? What if we all decide to let fear guide us no more?" Behind the man, the wolf, emboldened, stepped forward, its posture shifting from a defensive crouch to an alerted grace. The man's gaze flickered between the wolf and the shadows, doubt still tracing his features. Mabel recognized that doubt, a familiar companion whispering that safety lay only in power and control. Power can be shown, and strength can be wielded without bloodshed if we choose. Mabel's resolve solidified as she spoke. The words filled the air with an electric charge, an invitation woven between them, tethering her intention to the confines of compassion. But the snapping branches echoed fiercely again. A larger figure stepped into view, its eyes locked onto Mabel, assessing her intent, the pack's protector revealed. This was no ordinary confrontation. It was a moment that threatened their fragile truce. Time hung delicately, each heartbeat resonating with every potential outcome. Would the man embrace Mabel's voice of reason, stand alongside her, or recoil in fear, shattering their moment of unity? The potential for transformation loomed large, ready for someone to take the next step. As the alpha wolf edged closer, lips pulled back in a subtle show of dominance, Mabel recognized the impending call for authenticity, for courage to face both the fear of the unknown and the tacit vulnerabilities lurking inside themselves. Would they unite in this challenge, or would division reign supreme? The journey had changed, pulling her into a deeper layer of connection and responsibility. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down, and as the silent standoff continued, it became clear. This was merely the beginning. Each soul in the clearing held a story yet to unfold, their destinies poised on a precipice. Would Mabel's belief in compassion unlock doors to understanding, or would that chance dissolve into darkness? The answer lay looming, just beyond the fragile boundary of shared fear. Mabel stood at the edge of a monumental decision, and the air crackled with intensity as she faced not just the wolves, but the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. The alpha wolf bore an expression that mirrored Mabel's own tumult. Silent strength, fierce protectiveness, and underlying vulnerability. This was a reflection of her journey, and now, more than ever, she needed to harness that strength, both for herself and for the fragile creature before her. "Please, both of you," she implored, her gaze shifting between the man and the wolves. "The world doesn't need more violence. It needs understanding. We can unlearn our fears and choose a different path." Her voice resonated with a newfound conviction, breaking through the fraught atmosphere. Each word encapsulated her transformation. No longer a passive widow confined by doubt, she had become a fearless advocate for change. With the weight of the moment pressing heavily around them, Mabel took a few cautious steps forward. "I know what it's like to feel alone, to carry the weight of choices that can mean life or death." Her voice wavered slightly, but her determination remained resolute. "Let's not continue this cycle. Let's choose compassion and trust." The man's grip on his weapon loosened ever so slightly, uncertainty darting across his features. Mabel sensed a fracture in his facade of confidence. Compassion began to creep in where fear had once taken hold. Perhaps they were both fighting the same battle after all, an internal wrestling shaped by false narratives around what it meant to protect. Then the shadow of the alpha rose before her, its primal majesty commanding attention. The wolves were not here to attack, they were here to survive, just as Mabel was trying to reclaim her life. "They deserve understanding as much as we do," she continued, her heart racing with the clarity of purpose she felt. "Let us choose not to react in fear, but to respond in bravery." The silence was deafening, charged with the possibility of change. Mabel took advantage of the stillness, stepping closer. Softening her voice further, she gazed into the depths of the alpha's eyes, their worlds colliding, creating a connection forged in resilience and compassion. "Together, we can forge a new narrative where fear does not rule. Maybe this wolf is not the threat. Maybe it's an opportunity. Behind her, she felt the palpable energy of the crowd begin to shift. It was a ripple of hope flowing through, challenging assumptions resting on the precipice of fear. Mabel directed her voice to the man, drawing clarity as she laid bare their common humanity. What if we could protect each other instead of fearing what's different? Just as she thought, the forces of connection surged to life, the pack's posture shifted. Mabel saw the alpha take a step back, its expression softening into curiosity rather than aggression. The moment hung in the air, electrifying and vibrant. There was still time for him to choose, time for the others behind her to respond. With a breath of resolve, she turned to face the crowd. "Look," she said, her voice steady. "This wild creature, this wolf, has shown me the true meaning of strength. It doesn't rest in power or control, but in the willingness to embrace vulnerability." She glanced back at the alpha, acknowledging its power wrapped in grace. If it can stand its ground, so can we. The winds of change began to blow gently around them, as Mabel's words crystallized in the tension of the moment. The man's eyes flickered with understanding. "You're not just speaking for the wolf, are you?" he stated, his voice steadying as he visibly confronted the layers of his own fear. "You're speaking for all of us. This is our chance to redefine our legacy," Mabel affirmed, urgency pulsing through her veins. "Let's choose compassion over fear. Let's stand together, both for each other and for those we don't understand." In an electrifying turn of events, the man lowered his weapon, the tension diffusing like steam released from a kettle. The crowd behind them shifted, emotions charged with a sense of unity igniting. Mabel felt the warmth of their potential coming alive. Where once was fear, now was hope. As they all stood united, the alpha wolf hesitated, its gaze shifting back to Mabel. Slowly, it too began to relax, the wild ferocity giving way to an understanding that vibrated in the air. Mabel felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment wash over her. She had taken a leap into the unknown, and it had ignited courageous choices in others. On that night, Mabel became more than a widow or a farmer. She emerged as a beacon of strength, capturing the essence of advocacy through empathy. United, they were not only a community transformed, but also a reflection of possibility, where courage emerged amidst adversity and compassion thrived over fear. As the wolves drew closer, no longer adversaries but allies, Mabel understood the true power she had unlocked, not just for the wolf, but for herself. The journey she had undergone culminated brilliantly, transforming challenges into triumphs, uncertainty into unified strength. Mabel turned to the crowd, her voice ringing clear and unapologetic. "This is the moment for us," she declared, feeling the weight of past shadows fall away. "Together, we can choose to nurture, to protect. Let's not retreat into fear, but step forward into connection." And as the moon illuminated the faces of those gathered, Mabel realized she had conquered more than just the fears she had harbored. This battle transformed her identity, shifting her from solitude to solidarity, tethering her fate not only to the wolves, but to her community, all forged into a new legacy of courage and understanding. As dawn approached, so did a sense of purpose and fulfillment towards a shared path, an echoing promise that this, truly, was just the beginning. Now, if you feel inspired by Mabel's incredible journey and want to continue witnessing these transformative stories, you need to subscribe now to the channel. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to keep these emotional tales alive and thriving. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with 5 friends who need to see how courage can change lives. Your voice matters, and together, we can continue to spread compassion and understanding. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Mabel's journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Join this conversation.